अज्ञानान्मनस्वापुपादे कर्तृत्वादिनि च आत्मनि कल्पयन्ते अम्बुगते चन्द्रे चलनादि यथा अम्बस. The trembling that belongs to the waters is attributed through ignorance to the reflected moon dancing on it. Likewise, agency of action, of enjoyment, and of other limitations which really belong to the mind are delusively understood as nature of the self, Atman. Shankara in this verse talks about the ignorance of mind. The mind expresses ignorance by mixing the absolute with the relative and the relative with the absolute. So ignorance of the mind is expressed as mixing. In a deeper sense, we take the absolute, which is Satchit Ananda, existence, awareness and joy, bliss, and we feel that it is actually relative. We take that which is relative, such as BMI, and think that it is absolute. The greatest expression of vanity is the feeling of doership, kartṛtva, where we think that such and such thing is happening because of me. Where there is doership, there is deservership. I project that the self is the doer and the deserver. But we also just studied that the self does not have a purpose. Self is complete and self is being. Self is changeless. Self is actionless. It is the mind and intellect equipment that express this I do and I deserve. Candre calanādi yathāmbhasaḥ. Both the direct moonlight as well as the reflected moonlight on a vessel containing water are unaffected by the turbulences in the water contained in the vessel or the water in a pool. Yet, to a child looking at the moon on a turbulent water seems to have broken the moon, and the child takes immediate steps and tries to fix this breaking of the moon. In reality, nor is the moonlight affected by any dirt or mud or any turbulence in the vessel. The moonbeams remain pristinely pure. So, in this analogy, moon is referred as the self, pure consciousness that we are, The reflection of the moon on the water is the reflected consciousness on our ego. Water referred in this simile is our mind. As long as our mind remains as pure ego with reflected consciousness, without coming down to the ego that is ahamkara, our mind remains as stilled, serene and pure like the river without any movement of water, still transparent, still any movement of water, still transparent, like the Manasarovar near Kailasha. Leaf that is thrown on the water sometimes, or the various situations, events, good or bad, that happen to us, that comes to us, and that fetches us experience. The broken moon, the disturbance in the water and the apparent broken moon on the water is the disturbance of our mind caused due to the doership, due to the ego, that such and such things have happened to me. I am affected by such and such things. I am disturbed. I am tensed. I am elated. Or I am in a hopeless situation, etc. All the ideas that I am this, I am the doer, all these things belong only to the mind, which is but a upadhi, a conditioning, a limiting factor, and exists only when it is active. When the mind is inactive or not present in deep sleep or in coma, we find that such notions of I am that, I am this, do not exist at all. Thus, all the notions of the attributes of self are only temporary thoughts of the mind. A verse in the Bhagavad Gita says, all activities are carried out by three modes of material nature. But in ignorance, the soul, deluded by false identification with the body, thinks of itself as the doer. In the grip of an unforgiving ego, the soul falsely identifies itself with the body. Hence, it remains under the illusion of doership. Let us say there are two trains standing side by side on a platform, and a passenger on one train fixes his gaze on the other train. When the second train moves, it seems that the first train is moving. Likewise, the immobile soul identifies with the mobility of the Prakriti. Thus, it perceives itself as the doer of actions. One may question that if the soul is truly the non-doer, then why is it implicated in law of karma of actions performed by the body? The reason is that the soul does not itself perform actions, but it illumines the actions of the senses, mind, intellect. For example, a chariot driver does not pull the chariot himself, but he directs the horses. Similarly, In a relative sense, we can say the soul is responsible for the actions of the mind-body mechanism. But in reality, it is not so because in absolute existence, the soul does not have any doership. The soul does not perform any actions. And one who does not act cannot get any result of such actions not undertaken by him also. So, at the transcendental level, if it is asked that whether a Jivan Mukta undergoes karma, then it has to be very clear that at the transcendental level, existing as the self, he has no karma whatsoever. Even though at the body-mind level, the body-mind level does suffer or does undergo joy or sufferings due to the actions performed and the prarabdha karma due to the actions performed in the past. But how does he see things around him? A realized seer is the one who sees the reflection as it is and stands unruffled by the events that happen in his life. Like a king who remains peaceful in spite of various things that go on in the court, that go on in his kingdom. All the disturbance happens when the mind mistakes the reflected consciousness on its ego and believes that the mind or the physical entity of the human being itself is real and ignores that the body-mind borrowed the reflected consciousness only to discharge the responsibilities, to clear the karma, and to retrace to the Lord's abode, Prashanti. When such disturbance happens due to ignorance of the truth, then the Aham ego or the bigger I is colored with the smaller I, and the Aham is mistaken and identified as Ahankara. This is how we are often affected by little disturbances in our life. Every moment disturbs our balance, and we react thoughtlessly to rectify it. If we developed a little of the witness consciousness which is being taught in the Vedanta, we would not react in haste at all. Calm observation may be the best way to resolve a disturbing situation. By observation, we come in touch with a part of our being that is truer than the superficial self, ego, ahankara. The capacity of the mind to think is there because it is enlightened by Brahman or Atman shining within, and it is by that the mind is capable of activity. Those who have realized the self say that the mind is pervaded by Brahman. He who dwells in the mind is within the mind, whom the mind does not know, whose body is the mind, who from within rules the mind is thyself, the inner ruler, immortal, says Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. That which one cannot think with the mind, but that by which they say that the mind is made to think, know that only to be Brahman, says Kenopanishad. Just as a piece of iron moves in front of a magnet, so also this mind moves in front of the inner ruler. It plays, thinks, feels, and imagines before the divine presence, just as the minister plays and works before the presence of the king. Mind shines in its borrowed feathers. It appears like Chaitanya. How can the mind which gropes in darkness, which changes in every minute, which has a birth from intellect, Mahat, and also faces death in Prakriti, be termed as pure consciousness? He has given various analogies and he has spoken at length on this aspect. Consciousness versus mind. Why mind itself is not the supreme? Why mind cannot be termed as the initial cause, mind or intellect? Why mind or intellect cannot be confirmed as acting without a previous cause? He has spoken one-to-one to few of you and also in various sessions. Incidentally, not knowing that this verse is coming up, yesterday in a brief or to one of the sadhakas, he said, it is as though pure consciousness, out of compassion, gives space, gives permission, graces the mind to borrow his or that energy and operate, without which mind can never come into play. Poetically, he compared this grace as the grace of a railway passenger who gracefully and compassionately gives space to another standing passenger. Or at the macrocosm level, he compared this grace to the grace of the sun, which provides sunshine, the grace of the moon, which gives coolness, without which the earth can never experience coolness. Without the experience of the sunshine, the earth cannot function at all. Similarly, if just for imagination, if pure consciousness remains and only pure consciousness remains, then from where, like the world cannot function without the sunshine. If there is only pure consciousness, then how the mind can function at all? Be clear, this verse is all about the mind or intellect confusing and taking themselves to be the pure self. In that context, he is telling all these things. So, though in reality pure consciousness is Nirguna Nirakara, but poetically, he said yesterday to one of you, it is as though pure consciousness compassionately allows mind and intellects to borrow its energy and operate. Without that grace, there can be no mind functioning ever for anyone on this earth. Does a Jivan Mukta have a mind? A verse in one of the treatises says, Dehabhimane galite vignate paramatman yatra yatra mano yati tatra tatra samadhaya. With the disappearance of the attachment of the body and with the realization of the Supreme Self, for a seer, for a Jivan Mukta, whatever object his so-called mind is directed, he experiences only samadhi, even while facing, while seeing, while experiencing all those objects. Or even more clear way to put it is, whatever objects that come in touch, come in contact with a realized master, all of them get merged and disappear in the state of samadhi that the master or a Jivan Mukta ever is. Thus, to recap, to summarize, just because in our youth, in our mid-age, up to our old age, till the time we start losing our memory, our brain functions very efficiently, our mind performs all functions very efficiently. It is foolish to think that my mind or my intellect is all powerful by itself. Or in other way, whenever mind is disturbed, it is also wrong and stupid to think that my consciousness is disturbed. Like the child saw the moon in a disturbed water in a vessel and thought that the moon is broken. Both ways, let us be very clear. Consciousness or self or Brahman is changeless, has no relation, no association with whatever happens to a jiva at his BMI, to his mind, to his intellect, to his body, to everything around about him in his jivahood. And the other way, the other thing also to be clear is, never should we, out of our delusion, out of our ego, out of our ignorance, take our efficient mind, efficient intellect to be efficient, all in all, efficient self. We should be ever aware that it is due to the self of all, your consciousness, gracing itself to get reflected in our mirror intellect, that our intellect or our mind is able to perform its functions. So, like he concluded in the Drisya Viveka session, go beyond the reflected consciousness, merge with the pure consciousness, and exist post that merger, even unaware about the merger. And ever exist in your sahaja avastha, in your sahaja samadhi. Hari Om.